Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 89 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hey. So we're coming to you here in early January after the majority of the bowl games are done. We've only got the national championship awaiting us, and I'm coming just off of traveling back to Los Angeles after some good holiday time with you and the family back in Traverse City. So it was a good trip.
Yes, it was. It was a great trip. Great time to be with family, of course, and hopefully all of our listeners out there have been able to enjoy that as well. In fact, that leads into my, our traditional beverage that we like to open at the beginning of our podcast, because this podcast, of course, is partially based on you and I's conversations that we regularly have when we're together and when you were growing up and a little younger. I would often have a beverage in my hand and telling you what I thought about college football or this, that, and the other thing, and slowly evolved into this. And so one of the things I'm looking forward to doing today is I've got one of my favorite beers. It's a Labatt Blue, which is a Canadian Pilsner. It's an outstanding beer. It's kind of my go-to, in fact, for most of I'm going to say most of the last 20 years or so, certainly during this time that I've lived here in Michigan. It's readily available. It's as available as Budweiser would be. And it just happens to be a bottle that you purchased and then left behind when you left to go home to LA. So I particularly like the fact that I get to drink a beer bought by my son.
You're like mooching
so
off
thank you,
me.
Alex, for this cold. Yeah, thank you, Alex, for this cold beer. It's a bottle though, so I don't know how it will come across on the thing. I'll try my best. Did you hear that? It's just a very quiet. Yeah. Yes, but cheers to you, son. Cheers to you, and thanks for the beer.
Well, no problem, Dad. That is one of my favorites as well, Labatt, and I tried to have a good bit of it while I was out there because you can't get it here in LA. So
right. I bet you there's places you can, but it's not common.
Right, not just like at the Ralph's grocery store.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, they're not going to have that. All right, so as we said, we're going to be talking about all the different bowl games and the college semifinals. We gave predictions on our last podcast, which we'll go over and see how we did. But before we dive into all of that, there is some Nebraska-related news. We didn't talk at all about, or much at all, about recruiting stuff on the previous podcast, and since then we've had the first signing day, and Scott and the coaching staff were able to pull together a pretty nice class right there near the end.
Absolutely. It's pretty amazing what they were able to pull off. Given that we're a team that now has 3 consecutive losing seasons, to have been able to put together back-to-back top 20 recruiting classes. And this class is very much comparable with last year's. It's maybe just a little bit of what people might describe as a notch below, because of maybe one player or two in the overall. But this class is filled with what I believe are going to be some key difference makers, some top 100 type recruits, if you will, consensus top 100 type recruits, and then probably a good dozen players that would be considered in the top 300. So as recruiting classes go, this is one of the best ones we've had, and since the early 2000s. When Bill Callahan was our coach, and he was quite a good recruiter and put together a couple of good classes. So we're going in the right direction, even though on the field we didn't get the results this year that we wanted. This class is really outstanding, and I'm sure we'll go into more detail on this later after the second signing day, and when things are a little slower in the whole scheme of college football. But as a kind of a summary, we've got some guys at the top end of this class. A couple of them that are played in a all-star game today, in fact, and have been practicing all week and stuff. And we've been getting reports from them, and they're doing very well. And that was Turner Corcoran, who's an offensive lineman, 6'6", 275 pounds. One one of those key 500-mile radius recruits. That's the term they used basically to describe that. What you really need to be able to do, what Nebraska philosophically needs to be successful at is securing commitments from a high percentage of the best recruits within a 500-mile radius of their university. Now, a lot of schools, because they have so much population and talent around them, they really could find a top 15 recruiting class within 50 miles of their campus. But for Nebraska, we kind of described it as being 500 miles, and that we really need to kind of lock in that area. And this is a class that kind of represents a pretty good job of doing that 500-mile radius. And the reason you want to do that is because those are players that, number one, tend to have a little deeper and better understanding of your program and what it is, because they're from the region. Their proximity to Lincoln also makes it easier for their families, and so the support structure and everything tends to be a little more consistent and available to players. And then they're likely to stick around and understand the culture of the program more easily than maybe some guys from further away. Now, that's not to say that we don't want to recruit nationally, because we have to. That is an absolute must, and we want to do that. But it's just the probabilities that these players are going to turn into good football players for us tends to be a little higher if you have all those other things. So that's where that 500-mile radius is important. It's more likely that you're going to have a better chance at those player region than ones that are from further away. So a guy like Corcoran is really important. But then, as the other all in this high school All-American game is a kid from Florida, which is another area where this class just shone. I mean, we were able to secure commitments, a number of players from Florida, including three from the Miami area, and not just average players, but good four-star, top 250 type talents. And for us to be able to do that, to go into Florida and do that, pretty darn amazing. And the only reason that we're, or one of the big reasons, because of Scott's past there at Central Florida and his staff. Some of them have ties to the South Florida area, and they are really taking advantage of that. And so it's exciting. I did not expect that we would end up with a class like this. I think this was a critical class, and so anybody who questions Scott and his staff's ability to recruit need to kind of chill their wheels on that. And it's really, I'm more concerned from a Nebraska perspective about how are our coaches going to improve, because that's what needs to happen. They need to improve in their coaching as much as anything.
Right. I haven't been following the recruiting stuff as closely as you have, but I was seeing all these posts. So and so is N, and Nebraska gets this or that 4-star. On some of the websites I frequent, about Huskers or college football, which was cool to see for sure. Like you say, coming off of 3 4, 2-4 win and then 1-5 win season, you'd expect our recruiting to kind of be down the tubes, but Scott's doing a good job of selling the program that he wants to make, and obviously it is exciting, especially for offensive talent. He has a very dynamic offense, so that attracts some good skill talent there and interest from those types of players.
Yep, I agree, and it's good thing to be optimistic for the future about that. If we can just turn those last two classes into the core of what will be our team for the next 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And then the other piece of news, and this one's a little more recent, is that we heard that Frost and the coaching staff were having a meeting with Maurice Washington to kind of discuss his future with Nebraska. And it was officially declared that he is gone from the program, will probably be leaving the university. My guess, just going off of gut feeling, is that Scott had a serious sit down with him and laid out okay, this is the path to, redemption, quote unquote, if you want to, stay with the team, and probably putting up some high barriers and expectations on Maurice that he was not prepared to fulfill. What's your take?
Exactly right. And the bottom line was that either they felt he wasn't already fulfilling, those expectations that he had set, or he set expectations that Maurice was unwilling to accept and take. So, bottom line is they decided to go their separate ways. Maurice still has a legal issue out there in California hanging over his head, and so I just think it's disappointing, because I think if he ever is able to get himself, straightened out, so to speak, in terms of what he's doing and the choices he's making and his attitude from a teammate standpoint, that he has NFL talent as an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You hate to see that, you hate to see that kind of go to waste, so to speak. But you have to have the package, the whole package enough to keep it together. And so far, he hasn't.
Yeah, he hasn't proven that he can do that. So
Right.
yeah, like you say, definitely a bummer, but at the same time, I feel like it's kind of a good thing that we're just kind of like, all right, it's gone, it's in the past, we're moving on. We don't have to speculate about whether he'll play or not, for next season. We can just move forward with the running backs we know we have.
Exactly. And as much as I know he was a special talent, we have some pretty high quality young players coming in, including this recruiting class we just talked about. We have two outstanding running backs in that group. And so, I'm optimistic that we will have effective running back options going forward.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And then one thing that we were going to bring up on the previous podcast but didn't have time for is some of the coaching shuffling that's been going on. Two of the big ones are that Lane Kiffin got the job at Ole Miss, and Florida State got Mike Norvell from Memphis. So those were two of the bigger positions to fill this offseason.
Right. And, I knew that Kiffin was going to be getting some opportunities. I'm not surprised at all that the SEC is where he landed again. I think that's where he kind of wants to be. He's a guy that I think likes warmer weather. He likes having access to the SEC area type of athlete, and I think once he gets the ball rolling there, he'll do well from a recruiting standpoint. But I also think that it's likely that what's happened in the past will happen again, which is that at some point his snarky attitude will probably get in his way and hinder his ability to take it to a high level that he's capable of. He won't quite get there.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm kind of curious to see how he does, and also following the story of Les Miles at Kansas as well. Because those are some like you say, coaches with personalities, going to some kind of a little bit lower programs. Not Ole Miss as much, I guess. Ole Miss has some serious history to them, but we'll see. We'll see how they do.
That's right. Exactly. It's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see.
All right. So then, as we said, the bulk of our discussion today is going to be on the bowl games and the college football playoff. And we can go ahead and start with those, since those were some of the first games that we watched before the New Year's Day games. There was the Peach Bowl with Oklahoma and LSU. We both predicted an LSU victory. I said 42-24. You said 48-28. But neither of us quite got the blowout nature of it quite right. It ended up being 63-28 Oklahoma, and LSU.
No, not Oklahoma.
Yeah.
LSU.
Well, right. Sorry. 63 LSU over Oklahoma 28.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And
well, I got the 28 right.
Yes, 63-28. And yeah, it was not a close game pretty much from the start. LSU kind of pulled away early and kept that lead the whole time.
Right, exactly. They were the superior team, and Oklahoma, Oklahoma had some issues with some of their players not being eligible, which they needed all hands on deck to even give themselves a reasonable chance. And with those players gone, and I think that just they just weren't even in the same stratosphere as LSU on that day.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and not to mention that at least so far, Burrows is holding off, fending off the Heisman curse because he played great that day. I had got like 7 touchdowns in the first half, which was like a record of some kind or something like that.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yep, yep. That's a remarkable thing to do under any circumstances, but in those kinds of championship level competition and pressure and stuff like that, to rise to the occasion and be that effective, he was remarkable.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think it definitely puts LSU as the favorite going into the national championship game. They're the number 1 ranked team for a reason. But talking about the other game in the Fiesta Bowl, Clemson versus Ohio State. Clemson ended up pulling up well, it wasn't an upset per se, but it was they came back to win against Ohio State 29-23. I was the one who predicted a Clemson victory, although a little higher scoring. I predicted 38-31 Clemson, whereas you predicted 38-31 Ohio State. So
Correct. And Ohio State, is again one of those things where I would describe that as a game in which Ohio State lost it more than the Clemson won it. And I don't mean that as a slap in the face to Clemson. What I'm really talking about is as I look and watch as we watch that game together, there were just countless opportunities for Ohio State to take control of the football game, especially early, and they were unable to capitalize on those opportunities. And then turnovers and things of that nature kind of got into it a little bit. But bottom line is, though, as the game progressed, the leadership of Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback from Clemson, definitely played a factor. And he just was a gamer and made plays, and their coaches' strategies and their preparation showed up. I mean, the adjustments that they made at halftime clearly made a difference. So Clemson was a championship level team on that day, and Ohio State, I think, stepped in a little bit and did not play at their best level.
yeah, yep. Well, we were talking before the game, and you were saying that Ohio State was a more talented team, top to bottom, and I was kind of leaning towards Clemson, just from how well they were playing near the end of their season and their status as the defending national champion. But you're correct. Just looking at that game on its face, Ohio State looked like the more talented team, and they had 3 opportunities in the red zone in the first half, I believe, where they could have scored touchdowns and ended up setting for field goals, and then ended up biting them in the butt later on. Kind of as we predicted, they were controlling the game, but they weren't able to put it away early. And then Clemson got 1 touchdown and then a field goal, I think, at the very end of the half, and I forget if they were in the lead or they were just like behind them by like 3 points or something.
Ohio State was winning at halftime, but yes, they could easily have been comfortably ahead if they had converted some of those field goals into touchdowns, which they should have.
Mm-hmm.
There were also a couple of calls in that game that certainly swung momentum. Now the fact is, Ohio State still had opportunities to win, still had opportunities to stop Clemson from winning, and couldn't do it. So I think in the end, those challenging referee calls and such that didn't go their way were disappointing and obviously had an impact on the game. But at the end of the day, Ohio State still had plenty of chances to win it and couldn't.
Right. Yeah. And of course, I was going to say, any Ohio State fans listening would probably be upset if we didn't bring up the calls, because it wasn't just one. There were several
Right.
calls right on the edge that had a big impact on the game. For example, you were talking about Trevor Lawrence in an interview. He said that after that big sack, that ended up being called for targeting, where Ohio State lost one of their best defensive players. It kind of rung his bell a bit, but in a good sort of way, and he ended up coming back out and playing harder with more intensity, and they started running him more. And from there, he kind of rallied his team, and had that great drive down the
At
field
the end,
near the
yeah.
end of the game where they scored in like 6 plays or something. So he's something else for sure, and I'm excited to see the quarterback battle between him and Joe Burrow in the national championship game.
I agree. I think it will be fun to watch that game, if for no other reason than those two quarterbacks, and which one of them can rise to the occasion again and play lights out. And he did. I mean, he was not known as rudder. That was clearly a tactic or a strategy that they had chosen to employ for this particular game with him. And I was shocked they did it, frankly. But apparently so was Ohio State, because they weren't ready for it, including the longest run of his career, 63-yard touchdown run, in which he ran that ball with some pretty good quickness, speed out of that backfield once he got going with those long legs. He did good. So anyway, it was a very entertaining game. It was enjoyable to watch. I think all the fans got their money's worth, so to speak. And there was some really good talent on that field on that day.
Yeah. Well, and the other factor, talking about the national championship game, is that both Clemson and Ohio State beat each other up pretty good. Like, there were injured players going down both sides throughout the game.
That's true.
Whereas LSU, because they were so far ahead, got to pull out their first teamers, in the second half. So in terms of who's going to be better physically and health wise going into that national championship game, it'll definitely be LSU, though Clemson has a full 2 weeks to heal up before that game.
Yeah, and I guess I wasn't following the whole schedule process, throughout the season and such, or even since last year. But this is I believe, the first time that we've effectively had a full 2 weeks between the semifinal games and then the finals. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure. And there might have been some times when it was like 10 days or something, but never 14.
Right.
And so that's kind of interesting to me that they're choosing that, because I remember the NFL, has kind of gone back and forth between having 2 weeks between the conference championships and then the Super Bowl, and then just 1 week. And they've kind of tried it both ways. There's some downsides to going 2 weeks, because it just creates so much time for, interviews and obligations and just all the hype. And sometimes it gets overwhelmed. Although I haven't sensed that this year with the college football championship. I haven't sensed that there's an overhype, almost fatigue factor that's coming in yet. Maybe that's going to happen over this next week, like middle of next week, when they do their final press conferences and stuff, like on Wednesday. Maybe by then, Thursday, whenever it is, then you'll start to see the fatigue factor, where the players kind of get chippy and start saying things that they probably shouldn't, and things of that nature. And so it'll be interesting to see how this 2 week layoff, from a health standpoint as well as a preparation standpoint, affects both teams.
Yeah. The only thing I saw related to that was that people are commenting online after the famous Idaho Potato Bowl between Ohio University, yes, my alma mater, and Nevada,
in which the Ohio Bobcats won, and Frank Solich did his team a service.
That's right, and he got bathed in French fries, as is appropriate.
Yes,
but apparently the commentators were just constantly bringing up Joe Burrow being from Athens, talking about his past, and then talking about the national championship game, during the Ohio game.
Right.
So there was a bit of that.
Well,
there.
I'm sure they were probably trying to take advantage of that, given that he was, raised there basically in Athens and was a star at Athens, and his dad is the defensive coordinator at Ohio U. So all kinds of connections there to talk about. So of course, they're going to do that to promote their own product, right? Take
Yeah,
advantage of it.
very true. Then, of course, we had the Outback Bowl, or I'm sorry, not the Outback Bowl, the Citrus Bowl between Alabama and Michigan, which we talked about a good bit on our previous podcast. An interesting matchup. You predicted that Michigan was going to pull out the upset and win 28-24, whereas I predicted that Alabama would win in a higher scoring game, 31-38. But then the final score ended up being 16 Michigan, 35 Alabama. Another game, though, where Michigan was in the lead early, but they were kicking field goals instead of getting touchdowns and weren't able to capitalize on that momentum. And then the second half, right, Alabama adjusted, and it was never really close after that.
Right. I mean, it's really amazing when you think about early in that, the first quarter, a little bit of the second quarter. I mean, Michigan was running the football effectively. They were blocking Alabama. It was happening for them, and but then they just fell a little short. Yep, missing opportunities to get 7 and that sort of stuff. Drives dying after they have some good positive plays and such. And then in the second half, Alabama just came out, and all of a sudden Michigan wasn't able to do anything. In fact, did not score. Again. So.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember which was the game where the field goal kicker kicked the 57-yard field goal. I don't remember which team that was.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who that was. Wasn't that Wisconsin? Wasn't that Wisconsin?
Oregon?
Against Oregon, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't remember, but I know what you're talking about. I remember seeing it, and he just barely got it by there. I mean, at first it looked like, oh, yeah, no problem. But when they showed the replay, it was like, well, that was about a foot over that lower bar.
Yeah, it was close, but I mean, that's still damn impressive.
Hell of a kick. Oh, yeah, hell of a kick.
Yeah. But yeah, kind of went a little bit as I expected. I was kind of hoping Michigan would play it closer with them, but Alabama was obviously Alabama still, even in a year where they're a little down compared to their expectations. And they adjusted well at halftime, and Michigan was not able to readjust accordingly in time to make anything happen, really. So,
right.
That game wasn't as exciting for us, on New Year's Day, but one that was the Outback Bowl that I mentioned earlier, with Minnesota playing against Auburn. We didn't do a prediction for that one, but it ended up being quite the upset, with Minnesota winning 31 over Auburn's 24. Right,
and that's very much unexpected. And again, one quick reference back to the Alabama game, because it affects it's an implication to Auburn, is that I felt like Alabama, after having lost to Auburn in their last game, obviously already a disappointing season because they were not going to be in the playoff. I anticipated that they might struggle a little bit with focus and just attitude going into a game that was clearly going to be a disappointment for them. Now they were they kind of maybe came out that way a little bit. They might even admit that now that the game's over. And that's part of the reason why Michigan had success early. But now fast forward to Auburn. Auburn was a team that I mean, they beat Alabama, so they had all kinds of reasons to have momentum. They clearly have great talent, and so I looked at them and compared their roster to what Minnesota has, and even though Minnesota had a very fine year and really strong and that sort of thing, Minnesota had some injuries going into that game that affected their offensive line, and so there were all kinds of reasons for me to believe that maybe Minnesota could hang around for a while, but that Auburn would take this thing and go with it. And Minnesota just did what they've been doing all, and hammered away with the got some great play from their star wide receivers who are one of whom is going to be going to the NFL for sure, and I think one of them will still be around for at least another year. But the one who's going to the NFL put a stamp on that game and absolutely was the guy they needed to be able to beat Auburn, and it worked.
Yeah. Well, the part I remember, and maybe this was from earlier in the game, but just how dominant their offensive line was, even with that
Oh
injured
yeah,
player, and how many yards per rush they were getting, against an SEC team, with more talent than them.
right.
It goes to show, that us at Nebraska, we do have to play these tough, physical Big Ten teams, week in and week out, and they're up there with some of the best in the country.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and that's the thing is, as we look at some of these bowl games and their results, it does make me feel a little bit better about our own Nebraska team from the standpoint that, hey, that team that took us to the woodshed up there in Minnesota was probably a lot better than what I and most of our fans were giving them credit for. And so the loss to them, while still unacceptable and irritating to me, is a little more understandable if you then look at Minnesota in the context of their entire season.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And PJ Fleck is seems like he's staying there for the time being at least. And he's got this nice contract, and they're definitely very pleased with him. So I'll be interested to see what they do next year.
Yeah, he has a lightning rod, but so far the results justify the attitude. So we'll see how that evolves going forward. But you got to admit he put together a hell of a program and a hell of a team this year. We'll see if it has sustainability.
Yep. And then, of course, we have the Rose Bowl, Oregon versus Wisconsin. We both predicted a Wisconsin victory. I said 31-21. You said 42-28. But ended up being a bit lower scoring than we were expecting, with a 28-27 victory for Oregon in a game that Wisconsin probably should have won. But once again, they made some serious mistakes that let Oregon come back.
They were -3 in turnovers. They had 4 turnovers total, and that translated to at least 21 points, maybe more than that. So when you think about it in those terms, Wisconsin was dominating that game in statistical categories and every other way, but they were just turning the ball over. And Wisconsin's quarterback was throwing some interceptions. Their star running back, who went over 2,000 yards for the season, is one of the few players to have ever done that twice in his collegiate career. Jonathan Taylor, had a big time turnover at a critical moment in the game. So pretty crazy to me that Wisconsin lost that game, because I think if those two teams played 10 times, Wisconsin probably wins 7 or 8 of them. So in my opinion, that was an upset. After watching those two teams play, I believe from a overall coaching and just strategy and everything, as well as the talent and execution, everything was to the Wisconsin benefit except their own turnovers.
Right. Well, and you have to give credit to Oregon's defense as well, because I remember, there were some plays where Wisconsin was getting extra yards because Oregon's guys were trying to strip the ball rather than just tackle Jonathan Taylor, heads up. But that strategy of gunning for turnovers clearly paid dividends because, like you say, they end up getting 4 over the course of the whole game.
Right, that's true. Well, and obviously that was a strategy that they employed, and I don't know if it was something they did all season, because I didn't follow Oregon that closely, but I get a sense that they put an extra emphasis on it, certainly going into this game, knowing that Jonathan Taylor, that's probably the one weakness he has coming out of his college career, is that he's going to go into the NFL with questions about his fumbles, and now that his career is over, and the fact that he had a very obvious and significant one in this game, I think hurt him considerably in his NFL prospects. Not that he's going to drop out of the top tier of running backs, but I suspect he will go lower than expected because of that turnover problem.
Right. Yep. Well, it was a bummer because since Minnesota upset Auburn, if Wisconsin had won this game, the Big Ten would have been five wins, 4 losses overall in the bowl season, and then the Pac-12 would have been 3 losses or 3 wins, 4 losses. But instead, those numbers end up reversing. So the Big Ten
Right.
does have a losing record of four wins, 5 losses. And like we said, it was a game that Wisconsin should have won just based off of who was playing better overall, who was controlling the game more, for a good majority of it. But as we've seen in some other bowl games, it doesn't matter unless you're getting the points to back up your dominance.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's a problem. That's the great equalizer.
Yes, that's true. That's definitely true. And then last prediction we have is the Georgia Baylor game, which took place also on New Year's Day. That was the Sugar Bowl. I predicted that Georgia would win 35-32 over Baylor. You predicted 28-21. And the score ended up being 26-14 for a Georgia victory. But that score does not indicate how dominant it really was. Because
No,
Georgia
that's true.
held Baylor to very few points for the majority of that game.
I would agree. And Georgia was playing with a substantial number of players out for a variety of reasons. So their depth and talent was diminished, and yet they were still able to pretty much control and dominate that game. Baylor made it interesting. In the second half, Georgia had the opportunity to kind of blow it open, but they didn't do it. They didn't take advantage of it. And then Baylor did get some stuff together. And there were moments then where you thought, well, this could get interesting before the end of the game, but then it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's right. Because it was scoreless at halftime, and then Baylor started off the second half well, but they couldn't pull it all together. That lead was just too much from Georgia early. And like you say, the fact that they were so injured, or not just injured, but also having players go to the NFL and sit out and things like that.
And suspension.
Right, and they were still so physically dominant. It just goes to show how talented that Georgia team is.
I totally agree. Yeah. Totally agree.
Yep.
But it's been, I wouldn't say that was an uninteresting, unentertaining game. You know what I mean? Like there was enough from Baylor to make you think that the thing wasn't completely over. But then they were never able to kind of close the deal.
Right.
As opposed to like the Oklahoma LSU game, which was so disappointing because it wasn't even close.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Although people have brought that up, that generally speaking, a lot of the semifinals have not been great competitive games. We've had a couple of really good close ones, and this Clemson Ohio State one definitely was. But yeah, the LSU game was just kind of a standard blowout semifinal.
Right. Well, and to make arguments on that, I would say that some people have kind of written articles. Some journalists and stuff have written articles, suggesting that, well, this is the reason why you don't want to expand the playoff, and I think that's missing the point of why you have the playoff. I think the reason we started having this college playoff as opposed to what we used to have, which was just bowl games and then having the champion voted on, was to create greater interest and to bring all these different conferences who pretty much, they have non-conference games, but there's a lot of what I want to say, like isolation, within the sport, and as a result, it has been a regionalized sport for most of the time that college football has existed. And one of the things about college football playoff that should happen, or was one of the goals was to make it more of a nationally relevant national sport, and one in which a true quote quote true champion is crowned. I think now that we've seen this thing play out, even though some of those semifinal games have been uncompetitive, and if you expanded it, there would probably be even more uncompetitive games. But it would leave the door open for the occasional surprise that happens, like the first year of the playoff when Ohio State, who came in as the fourth seed, won not only the semifinal but won the championship. And I believe also Alabama, who wouldn't have been perceived as an underdog, but came in as the fourth seed, having not even won its own conference championship, ended up winning the national championship. And so for me, I don't think there is much argument if you're looking at the big picture. The thing that bothers me more is that now that we are here, it's about how it's diminished the significance and the pomp and circumstance and just the excitement for the average fan, not for the non-fan, but for the average fan of college football. The bowl games don't have the allure and excitement that they used to because we've spread them out over a variety of days, weeks even, and it's just it doesn't create the same ambiance and experience of as you know, I've called New Year's Day the high holy day of college football. There was a good period in my life when for decades that's the way it was. All the big games were played on New Year's Day. There might have been one game that was played like on January 2nd or something, but all of them were played there. It would be like 8 or 9 games, and you'd be flipping back and forth. And it was pretty much college football from like 11 o'clock in the morning all the way until midnight. And they were mostly good matchups with a lot of great teams playing against each other, and all of it was important because there weren't these playoff games, so all of them mattered. Now it's like people's focus is exclusively on just the ones in the playoff. Well, if that's true, then we need to expand the playoffs so that we have more of those games that people focus on.
Right. Yep. No,
rant over.
Yep. There's something to that. And we've talked about this topic in the past on the podcast as well about the diminishment of bowls. I know I've brought up in the past that, technically it was the same during the BCS era because the only game that mattered, was the national championship.
But it didn't seem as bad as it does now.
Right. Well, because that was just one game versus now there's 3 games in the playoff.
Right.
And I think just also in that time period, the bowls expanded. We got more and more bowl games like the Idaho Potato Bowl and, these ones that don't have as much historical significance, and the teams playing in them, are 6-6 or 7-5. And so people don't care as much. So you don't expect those games to get that much excitement, but it's the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, those bowls that do have that
Fiesta
history.
Bowl, right. Yep. Cotton Bowl. Yep. Exactly.
Yep. All right.
So, but I got to clarify. That is the famous Idaho Potato Bowl.
Yes.
Don't leave that word famous out of there because it's been a part of them for a while.
That's right. Well, because Ohio University has been there like 3 times now.
Yes, it has.
I've gotten acquainted with it. And so in total, I ended up predicting 4 of the 5 bowl games correctly, and you predicted 2 of the 5. So that's where
I got it.
The final tally comes out.
Yes, exactly. Well,
yeah.
That's a good thing I don't have any chips or dollars on it.
That's right. We'll run through a couple of the smaller bowl games here before we get to our prediction on the national championship game. The Cotton Bowl was Penn State versus Memphis, which we both felt pretty good that Penn State would win, and they did. 53-39 in a pretty high-scoring game.
Yes.
And then one of the surprising upsets was the Alamo Bowl with Texas playing against Utah, the Pac-12 champion. But they beat Utah 38-10.
Right. And that wasn't Utah was not the Pac-12 champion. They were the runner-up.
I'm sorry. You're right. But they were.
But still, they were definitely a favorite. Should have won that game if you look at the overall season. But it showed. What do I want to say? It kind of reflected, and it makes the Wisconsin Oregon game that much of a head scratcher to me because I was I felt so confident that Wisconsin was the better team, and frankly they proved that in every area except turnovers. But that's what matters, and they lost. But Texas took it to what I believe was probably the most complete team in the Pac-12 in Utah. Well coached, good, and basically all facets of the game. And Texas did all right.
Yeah.
Now, if I remember correctly, that was a close game at halftime. Then Texas pulled away.
Well, so twofold. One, I was thinking of them as the Pac-12 champion because, of course, they were the favorite in the Pac-12 championship game. The fact that Oregon
Correct.
beat them was quite the upset, but I think Oregon may have kind of exposed some holes in their defense that hadn't shown up earlier in the season, and Texas was able to do some of the same. It was 10-0 at halftime, so Texas' defense had done a good job of shutting them down, but certainly very much still within reach. But then in the third
Right.
quarter, Texas got a couple more touchdowns, and then it was pretty much out of reach for Utah.
Gotcha. Yep. And so it'll be interesting to see how that one victory, changes the trajectory of the Texas program and really the perception of them as we go into the next season. Because Texas, I think, going into that game, might have viewed themselves as a little bit disappointed, having lost some games they probably felt they shouldn't have, and just kind of muddling in being good but not great. But now I think that that victory in that bowl game might really help them.
Yeah. Well,
it will certainly increase the expectation of media.
yeah. Well, because correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like the past couple of seasons in these preseason polls and rankings, which you should never trust too much, but they've typically put Texas as like a top 15 or top 10 program. Like, oh, this is the year they've got all this talent, and so far they just haven't been able to make it happen.
Well, they've beaten Oklahoma, which of course has been the king of the hill in the Big 12 for quite a while, and here in recent years, and they've looked really good at times. And obviously, they recruit well because they're Texas and they have so much access to athletes. Speaking of, 50-mile radiuses, that's an example right there where certainly a 100-mile radius of Austin, they could easily sign a top 10 recruiting class every year with the talent in Texas. So Texas has an awful lot of advantages that should allow them to be in that situation. But recent results do not suggest that. And it is interesting that they just took let's see here. They made a change at offensive coordinator, and our old offensive coordinator who had somehow fallen up.
Tim Beck.
Tim Beck, yeah, he was the offensive coordinator there, and he got let go.
But he landed on his feet again.
I know, got another job, but which is where did I say he ended up? North Carolina State, right?
Yep.
I think that's what it was.
Yep.
But crazy, amazing, just amazing.
Right. But that's true. That we'll have to see how that change in coaching staff affects their offense next year.
Correct. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. But they got Ohio State's offensive coordinator, so we'll see.
We'll see. Well, and Tim Beck was at Ohio State before he came to Texas, so there you go.
That's true.
The speaking of the Pac-12, this was an interesting one that I didn't watch, but Boise State was ranked 19th in the pre-bowl game polls by the college football playoff team, whereas Washington was not ranked, and yet Washington destroyed them 38-7 in the Las Vegas Bowl.
Yes, and of course that was the game. I mean, the coach at Washington had already announced that he was leaving, to step away from the game, so I don't even know the circumstances. I don't know if he was still coaching or if he had already left, because I know his reason for departure was family related. He has some a special needs son that needs some special attention, I think, and so that was a driving factor in that decision. But Chris Peterson was a great coach, highly regarded, and had stepped away from Washington. I don't know if that was kind of viewed as his final game or not. Do you happen to know whether he coached that game or had he already stepped away?
I'm not sure, but that would make
I,
sense that if that was like his
yeah.
farewell game, that the players came out for him.
Well, and remember that he's from Boise. He was the guy that
Mm,
helped build Boise State, and so Chris having that connection, his players from Washington had a little extra motivation to make sure that they, sent the right message, and they did.
right. All right. Very good. And then another upset, at least it's not in terms of ranking, but just in terms of perception, I think it is, was Iowa versus USC in the Holiday Bowl. Iowa was ranked 16th, USC was 22, and Iowa proved that they earned that ranking by beating them 49-24.
Yes. And again, you would expect the roster from USC to have far more talent than the roster from Iowa, and that those rosters may have been much closer than historically they would be, based on USC's history. But the fact is Iowa just played Iowa football, very consistent football. They looked sound in what they were doing and beat them, just beat them up.
Right. Yeah, well, and the Iowa team that we very nearly beat, at Nebraska.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that you start looking at some of these games that we lost, like the 3-point loss to Wisconsin, and I mean to Iowa, the close fought game against Wisconsin, and then of course Minnesota doing what they did. Um, that's pretty impressive stuff that some of those teams did in the postseason. So, I feel like maybe Nebraska wasn't as bad as I was beating them up to be, because I was very angry with my team. Continue to be angry with my team.
Yes.
Yes.
I just looked it up. That what Peterson did coach in that bowl game, so that was his last game.
Okay. Okay. So that what I think that, and he was playing his old team.
Right.
I mean, so that had the double whammy there.
Right. Yep. Makes total sense. All right. So those were the bowl games of 2019, and so we have one final game to look forward to, that LSU Clemson game, which is
Yes.
was just I thought from the beginning that those two were the best two teams, and I wanted them to play. So I am excited about this. My brain says that LSU played so good and they're less injured, that I feel like they're definitely the favorites in my mind. But my heart wants Clemson to win again just because I like them as a team, and they've shown their ability in many games to be able to pull comebacks against teams that supposedly are more talented than them. They have that championship mindset. They've been there before. So I think that that X factor may be what gets them through yet again.
Got it. Okay. Well, I was thinking Ohio State was one of the two most talented teams. I would have projected from say mid-season that it was Ohio State and then LSU that were going to end up facing each other, not Clemson. Although Clemson has improved obviously over the course of the season and did what they had to do against Ohio State. And the thing that I just have to give them so much credit for is their coaching. Their coaching did such a good job of preparing and having a game plan that was effective against Ohio State. And if they can do that again, then Clemson might very well be able to beat what I believe is a superior, talented team in LSU. Now, I say that from the standpoint of across the board, like all the defensive positions and everything else. I just feel like LSU has great defensive talent. They have some great offensive talent, and they have a great quarterback. But Clemson also has a great quarterback, and they also have some incredible weapons and wide receivers and such. So I just think it's going to be a hell of a battle. The one thing that I believe will factor in here is LSU has been in a lot of big games. I mean, they had to play Alabama and they had to play Auburn and they had to play a lot of SEC teams and rise to that level of performance on a lot of big stages over the course of the year. And Clemson really didn't have to face that many tough teams in a row. So I wish I knew what the status of banged up players was and stuff, and just how. I mean, they may say, oh, they're going to play, but how many of them are truly healthy, and how many of them are going to be playing in not hurt? So I'm going to lean LSU. I think LSU is the better team, and so I will pick LSU.
All right. Well, for the sake of differing it up, and also because I'm going to put my faith in them like I did against Ohio State, I'm
Yes.
going to say that I could hear Mom doing her dishes there.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to say that Clemson takes it. I'm going to predict it'll be 35-31. I think LSU's offense is incredible, and that they will score some points, so that it's going to be on Trevor Lawrence and Clemson's offense to fire it up and score back in return.
Wow, that's awesome. Now that seems like a higher score than I'm gonna guess. I think there's going to be, like the first quarter is going to be a feeling out time for both teams. I think it's going to end up being low scoring early, particularly, and then it'll get hotter at the end, but it still won't get that hot. So I'm going to go 28-24 LSU.
All right. Good.
No, I'm sorry. Let's go 28-21
21.
LSU.
Right.
I want it to be a full 7 points.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, if either one of those scores sounds like it would be a good competitive game, so I'm looking forward to watching it.
Absolutely, it should be a good game, and again, the kind of feature of a national championship type of environment that the people who created this college football playoff were looking for, but I'm hopeful that they grow it into more teams, because if they're going to create so much focus on the teams that are in the playoff, then I want more teams in the playoff, so we have more things that matter in the postseason.
Right. All right. Very good. Well, it'll be we'll be back after the national championship game to discuss it, of course, and wrap up this season of college football. Of course, as usual, we'll come back and talk about some recruiting news and any kind of Nebraska related news that happens over the summer as we get into that. But it's been a fun season of college football, even though it wasn't as fun for our Nebraska team as we were hoping for, but still lots of good games to watch, and there's hope for the future and our youthful talent and all that. So I'm looking forward to all that.
Yes, I'm looking forward to the future. I can't describe this as a fun season. My pain factor is too great for me to call this a fun season, right, from the standpoint of being a Husker fan. But certainly it's been fun to watch Joe Burrows emerge as the player that he has. It's been neat to see some of the things happen that have happened in terms of Kansas State and Kansas with their new coaches creating some interest, I guess would be a way to put it. And then what Mac Brown has done at North Carolina. I mean, there's been some interesting storylines to follow. And going into next season, what's going on at USC. What's going to happen at Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been good but not great for some time. Michigan's been good but not great for some time. And so the pressure cookers are building there to be, with fan bases that expect more than just being good, that they expect pursuit of championships, and they're not happening. So the question is, what's going to happen with some of those programs? So lots of storylines going into next season.
Very true. Very true. All right. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can find us online. If you search for College Football Throwdown, we're on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. You can leave us a review there, a rating. Let us know what you think of the podcast. You can also find us on Podomatic.com and leave a comment there. We'll read it out on the air. You can also reach us at huskerpete13@gmail.com if you want to reach out with direct feedback. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for hosting with me. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.